So I'm Dave Ferguson. It's my pleasure to serve as Dean of the College. We are able to offer today both AIA and AICP continuing education credits for this lecture. And I understand we have a number of alumni joining us to take advantage of that perk. We're pleased to offer that, and especially want to thank our partners at the Indiana chapter of the American Planning Association for their assistance in offering the AICP credits. If you're a faculty member or a professional who wants credit for today's lecture, please write to caplectures@bsu.edu and we'll get right back to you. We've also been able to record all of our guest lecturers this year, and you can find them on our YouTube channel. Just type in Ball State College of Architecture and Planning. And now here's Scott Truex, Chair of the Department of Urban Planning, to introduce today's speaker. Scott.
Thank you, Dave. It is really great to have Juli Kaufmann on board today. I'm so excited. You heard some, maybe if you were on earlier, heard some of the banter. I got connected to Juli, probably 8 or 9 years ago when we were doing some field trips to Milwaukee. I was told you just got to take the students to see this incredible entrepreneur, this lady who's transforming this neighborhood and doing this incredible development around sustainability, around social justice and equity issues, and just a real advocate for neighborhood redevelopment through development. So Juli at that time was fixed development, and she has since won several awards, Executive of the Year for Milwaukee Business. She received the Betty Award. I saw that. That was great. One of the 7 entrepreneurial women selected last year by the Milwaukee, journals. So she comes from just some incredible projects, award-winning commercial real estate company. It's been transforming the core of Milwaukee. And so, Juli, again, thank you so much for taking time and talking with us. It's great to have all of our alums and current students joining us. So we're looking forward to this time with you, Juli. And FYI, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and I can serve as kind of a moderator when it's time. So thanks, Juli.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen and launch right into my presentation. So just give me a sec here. Okay, how about that? We're good? So hi, everyone. It is great to be with you at Ball State University. We're going to talk today about Milwaukee Invest, which Scott referred to. It's an inclusive real estate development model that I use here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The name Milwaukee Invest highlights what is possible when we intentionally invest in our collective time, talent, and resources in all of our neighborhoods. The action of investing is the key driver of this model, investing in each other through co-mentorship of projects, investing in local entrepreneurs through tenant cultivation, and investing capital through community investors. It also is an acronym. I don't use the acronym, but you always have to make an acronym out of stuff. It stands for Investing in Neighborhood Vibrancy, Entrepreneurship, and Sustainable Transformation on Main Streets. Invest. Okay, that was not really smoothly rolling off my tongue. I'll just roll right ahead. I talk fast, so hopefully I can cram this all in 50 minutes. That's me, in case you can't see me in this gallery of dozens of people. I thought I'd tell you a little bit more about myself as background to this topic, because really I'm just an average person who accidentally became a real estate developer. I really wish I was on campus with you all today. Probably a lot of you wish you were on campus. It's spring-like, I hear there, spring-like here, and it's a great time to be on a college campus. I would say that one of the most formative periods of my life started when I was in college at the University of Michigan. And that's where I went to school. And I spent most of my time protesting, the destruction of the rainforests. And also at that time, the first Iraq war, I protested. And at that time, I was figuring out my role in what we now call climate change and social justice. I spent a few years disillusioned post-college using my business degree to try and create change in corporate America. I specifically worked at Procter & Gamble, which was, but I used my skills to try and convince folks of the importance of whiter, brighter, and softer laundry. So that pretty much sucked the soul right out of me. And I eventually found my way back here to Milwaukee and for a time, the nonprofit sector. And I thought really mission-driven work would be my motivation. And while it was meaningful, I also was really frustrated finding that there was a lot of inertia in that sector just as much as the private sector, and we really weren't fixing things. So I found myself going back to my activist roots and spending a lot of time outside of my work working in my neighborhoods that I lived in. And I discovered this idea of entrepreneurship, which was a new concept to me many, many years ago. I started a green residential construction company, and that's a long story in a different lecture, but like any great entrepreneur, I failed at that. We entered the housing crisis in 2008, and a construction company building houses did not bode well. So, but I used that experience to leverage the founding of Fixed Development. And my aim through Fixed Development was then and is now to use commercial real estate as a tool for social change. I am an activist by nature, and my dissatisfaction with the status quo inclines me towards entrepreneurship. So in my work now, I question the inadequacies of traditional real estate and financial systems. I seek to disrupt these sectors with innovations that are designed to create a very, very high bar, which is to create socially just, environmentally sustainable, and culturally rich real estate projects that provide broad financial security for all. Why not aim that high, right? So let's talk about, let's see here, next. Oh, it won't let me advance. Let me see. There we go. I'm going to talk conceptually about my work for a minute. I'll be sharing a bunch of examples of my projects that are located on main streets in 5 different neighborhoods in Milwaukee. And here are a few pictures just to start. These are real projects that I have worked on across many neighborhoods here. Commercial corridors here in Milwaukee, and probably in most of the communities you come from, give life to communities. They create well-being. In thriving neighborhoods, these main streets provide places to eat, shop, and gather. They offer access to essential services like healthcare and banking. They create accessible job opportunities. But in contrast, these commercial corridors in disinvested neighborhoods and the places I work are typically marked by boarded up properties, foreclosures, and absentee ownership. Residents are forced to leave their community to shop for basic goods, and they take their buying power outside the neighborhood. This compounds the negative impacts of disinvestment. So the aim of my work is to disrupt that status quo. These are broad assumptions. And, in this lecture, I'm not going to give you a deep dive in the research to demonstrate to you that there is segregation, inequity, and inequality and racism. We're going to take that as an assumption that you all understand to be true, and you wouldn't be interested in my lecture if you didn't believe that. But there are certainly stats to back up all of these points. The bottom line is that the playing field right now makes financing primarily available in communities where values are strong and people and teams have capital access. In low-income communities, generally speaking, chronically low property valuations tend to hold back redevelopment. There are policies and practices that limit financing for ownership, and these are predominantly communities of color. And a lot of economic development projects in many cities, including Milwaukee, focus on large-scale employers, big projects, and they do not focus on community main streets many times. My goal has been to disrupt that status quo. So let's talk a little bit about the model. That's the name we refer to, the work of my company, which is called Fixed Development. And I've worked in this field for about 10 years now. So the projects you're going to see have all evolved over a decade. We've developed this model that uses commercial real estate development as a vehicle for transformation. The approach uses local talent, community assets, and we transform vacant commercial properties into thriving spaces for commerce and community building. In so doing, it's a for-profit model. It helps revitalize main streets and open more inclusive pathways for community wealth building in disinvested communities. So I'll highlight through the rest of my talk 3 key elements of my model. The first is that they're all populated by local businesses. Our tenants are all local. They're led by innovative local entrepreneurs. Our buildings are all community owned. So we crowdfund equity from local residents as a key foundation of our model. And third, We lead our projects with partnerships between real estate experts, people like myself, which is hysterical that I'm now an expert, and local activists who are grounded in each of their neighborhood communities. So, whoops. I'm first going to give you just some high level examples of my projects in Milwaukee, so you get a sense of the projects. I'm going to skip a lot of the details on some of these and just like run through what they are and what we've accomplished, because it was from a bunch of my first few projects that I really refined what the model elements that were working, what really we could keep replicating on each project. So I'm going to focus on those big pictures in terms of how we developed the model. And then I'll take a deeper dive in one specific project towards the end to show you a little bit more tactically and specifically how those elements manifest in a project. Let's skip that one. So I also have to keep track of my time here so that I don't go crazy. Okay, all right. This is one of my first projects. This is the historic Walker's Point neighborhood. When Scott Truex used to bring his students to Milwaukee back when we could travel and do such a thing, he'd often visit me in this neighborhood. This is what a pretty classic picture of some of the disinfested parts of the city of Milwaukee look like. And this particular neighborhood has transformed quite a bit over the past decade, but this is how it looked. Early on in my work, I asked the question, can real estate be a tool for environmental sustainability? Okay, so years ago, I was reading an article that chronicled pervasive, unreported toxic lead contamination at metal smelting operation sites across the country and in urban neighborhoods just like mine. And reading this interactive map in this article, I found one of the worst sites was located in Milwaukee, right across from where I lived. And I was raising my son in this neighborhood. So I set out to clean up that site and redevelop it into an environmental beacon. And despite being told by all the traditional real estate and financial experts that the approach I imagined was not possible, this is really how I cut my teeth on real estate development, merely by wanting to clean up my own neighborhood as a neighborhood activist. So if you look at this picture, there's a building here to the left, and then there's a little squatter building, then there's this little strip of green grass. That was the toxic waste site right across from my house, which is in the foreground. And if you look here, remember this little site, and then you look at this, you'll see the building we built. You see that? Building site. It's pretty transformative. So this is what we call the clock shadow building. It requires 50% less energy and 60% less water to operate as compared to a typical new construction commercial building. It uses renewable energy, primarily geothermal. It uses rainwater to flush the toilets. And 50% of the building materials are salvaged or recycled. Those are just a couple of the highlights of that project. We grow food on the roof. When we completed this project, it was named Building of the Year by the Wisconsin Green Building Alliance and was named one of the top 10 greenest projects in the nation by the AIA, and won one of their coveted COAT awards, for those of you who are familiar with the AIA COAT Awards, Committee on the Environment. So the building is home to local tenants that have a shared commitment to the community and environmental values. That's a urban creamery right in downtown Milwaukee. In this project, we innovated. Oh, there's another tenant example. A healing collective is in this building. Organizations committed to helping people be well. This particular example is a healing center for survivors of sexual violence. So we innovated on this project by not relying on traditional construction methods or narrow financial valuations, which have never underwritten this project. We funded it directly with investors that believed in environmental impact. Those investors now get a return on their investment that exceeds our projections. So I learned through this project that you can use real estate as a tool for environmental sustainability. However, the clock shadow building also showed me how hard it is to raise money, particularly as somebody who doesn't come from wealth or have a network of high wealth individuals. So in my next project, I wanted to try and understand, is there a way we can use real estate as a tool for financial empowerment? So I find, obviously, this may be like a duh statement, but one of the greatest hurdles to bringing ideas to life is access to capital. It's hard to finance real estate projects and deals, and especially if they aren't ones that solely maximize profit. These deals require patient capital and typically won't offer huge payouts, so they don't attract venture funds. And they typically are perceived as high risk because they are, so traditional lenders don't often help on my projects. This is what it looked like. Exciting, right? You see this and you think potential. So So on this project, it was a former tannery building. We supported 3 new small businesses. They've become vital assets to the neighborhood. And we did this with affordable rents while ensuring a sustainable return for investors. Instead of banks, we used crowdfunding to raise the equity to allow these tenants to populate the building. And we gave loans to tenants from those private investors as well. So these are my investors on this project. The way it innovated was by using crowdfunding. It allowed 25 neighbors and regular folks to support Main Street vitality and locally owned businesses. And so, yes, we showed through this project that you can use real estate as a tool for financial empowerment. However, through this project, I also saw the very homogeneous impact of my real estate innovations to date. Investors and business owners all look like me. And so while we created greater environmental sustainability and financial opportunity, it was generally by and for people who are white in a city where the majority of residents are people of color. So in my next project, I sought to answer the question, can real estate serve as a tool for social and economic equity? And to answer that, we turned to divested parts of our city where commercial corridors are pocked by foreclosures, absentee owners, and greater than 50% vacancy rates. Here's one such building. And this was my next project. It's called the Historic Wally Schmidt Tavern Redevelopment. See, right now, it's so hard to do these Zoom presentations. I'm like, are you guys listening? Do you have any questions? Can we pause here? But we can't, so I'm gonna keep going and hope that you're all hanging in there. Okay, so this is what that build, okay, thanks guys. Positive reinforcement. So it's so bizarre. This is what this building looked like on the inside. I mean, I don't know what you guys do within your careers, but this is like a small classic Milwaukee building. It was an old tavern. It was boarded up for decades. Thank you for the hearts, everybody. So when I came to this neighborhood, my first step as an outsider was to engage neighborhood-based partners as co-developers to leverage their local knowledge and relationships together with my real estate experience. And you might say, well, Milwaukee's not the biggest town. You know, really, is that not you don't understand that neighborhood? Absolutely not. In every neighborhood, it's very different. The community leaders are different. The community assets look different. The power structure looks different. The political capital is different. And I was from the South Side, which is very different than the North Side in Milwaukee. So by partnering up, we teach each other mutually transferable skills, provide shared credibility, and build local capacity with the partners I take on so that they can replicate projects on their own, hopefully, is the goal in the future. There's my partner on this project, Jeremy Davis. He's a resident of that neighborhood and lives in the 53206 zip code in Lindsay Heights, which is where the project is located. This happens to be one of the poorest zip codes and one of the neighborhoods in Milwaukee with the highest Black male incarceration in the country. Because our embedded commitment to the local community, we were able to hire a general contractor that was a Black professional and hire contractors and residents directly on the project. So such that, this is Jeff, such that 100% of our contractors were people of color. Jeff happens to be an unskilled person coming out new to the workforce, and he provided sweat equity to gain an ownership stake in the project and served as my intern for a brief period. So here's some after pictures. The project provided nearly $1 million in direct investment value in one of Milwaukee's lowest income neighborhoods. The building is now 100% occupied with 9 small businesses that are mostly Black or women owned. It's anchored by the Tandem restaurant, which has become a gathering place for people across the city. These tenants provide jobs for more than 20 people. And some of them are formerly unemployed local residents. There it is when it's done. And these are some of our 43 crowd investor owners. Many are new to investing, who invested as low as $1,000 and sometimes sweat equity, like Jeff. 30% of our owners are local neighbors. I'll be diving a little bit deeper again, as I said, into each of these elements, but just to give you a broad sense of how we approach each of these projects. The project's now generating a 6% annual return for its investors. So, at this point, I was asking, can real estate serve as a tool for social and economic equity? And to some extent, we've proven with this project, yes. The way this project innovated was by using the co-development model with a local neighborhood activist as my partner, and frankly, just believing that there's a path through innovation to enable private sector economic power in all of our neighborhoods. Crowdfunding works even in the lowest income places. Yet, through my efforts at building economic access through this project, I encountered one of the greatest barriers of my work to date, and that is the devastating power of racism in Milwaukee. As I was finishing up that last project, now that's over 4 years ago, time flies when you're having fun. Milwaukee was making national headlines. This was around 2016 due to a police-involved shooting of a Black man in our Sherman Park neighborhood. It ignited a civil uprising, pent-up frustration was expressed, and about 8 buildings were burned in the neighborhood where the shooting occurred in Milwaukee, including this 100-year-old community bank. And so at that time, the narrative being told to the nation was one of, that I now understood as a white person working in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and that is the realities of segregation, racism, and economic divestment in Milwaukee. Of course, since these events in Milwaukee in 2016, we've seen a growing movement around too many similar experiences across the country. It's become much more recognized and unfortunately common, the experiences in these neighborhoods. And so the question I'm asking now, there's the inside of that building when it was burned after the riots. Can real estate be a tool that builds racial equity? So I'd like to take you through a deeper dive, just as I'm kind of getting into the meat and bones of this discussion today, on this most recent project. It's called the Sherman Phoenix, burned during that uprising and left with a shell of a bank. We call it the Sherman Phoenix because it rose from the ashes quite literally. And I'd like to sort of highlight the 3 elements I've kind of very broadly talked on in those first projects, a little bit deeper in this project. And again, those include sort of what the key elements are to disrupt why real estate isn't working in these places and how to get it to work. The first is co-developing, bringing real estate expertise together with community organizing in a co-development model, where all of the power is shared and the credibility, the intellectual capital, all of it is viewed as equal at the table. Cultivating local businesses, local tenants, and really local occupants in the buildings. What does that look like and how do we do that? And then community ownership. How do we develop these community owners in our projects? How does that financing work instead of using the traditional routes of banks? So I want to just start by playing a video. I thought it'd be a really great way to introduce you to the Sherman Phoenix. After I came together with a partner who you'll meet through this lecture in a few minutes. We decided to take on this project. That's a long story and a very fun story, but I don't have time to tell it today. But it involved me being in my pajamas, and she was on the cover of the New York Times, and I texted her and said, holy shit, you're on the cover of the New York Times, let's do a project together. And it turned out to be this project. So this project was this video comes from very early on before we started the project.
Next to Milwaukee, the National Guard called in after simmering tensions between police and residents boiled over.
When the Sherman Park uprising happened, there was this unearthing of neighbors of Wisconsinites that were ready to respond to something, but needed a something to pour their hearts, their minds, and their finances into. And we're now saying, howdy, here we are. This is it.
When we learned about what was happening in the Sherman Phoenix, we were immediately moved to say, what is it that we can do?
When I looked at this opportunity of entrepreneurs and small business owners, most of whom are of color, in a fantastically refurbished building in our neighborhood, it speaks volumes.
This model is transformative, it's reconciling, it's healing, but it's also innovation. And I think the ability to demonstrate that not all incubation is birthed in Silicon Valley, but right here in an area that could be categorized negatively by the media, I think is powerful to be that hub of innovation.
The community and the neighbors are actual investors in creating their own environment and the success of this project. That is very unique. I think it's also going to make it sustainable. The expectation originally was maybe a dozen tenants, which is a lot. Now we're over 24 tenants, just speaks to this incredible desire and demand that's not being met in the marketplace.
Is this not amazing? Is this not amazing?
What was exciting was we have this big kickoff event to announce the number of our tenants, and from that the buzz just escalated. And so what we are cultivating is a space for all of us. Look around you. That's why we called you here, because we need visionaries who can imagine what this will be.
My vision for myself, I wrote that I would like to develop a comprehensive holistic wellness center in a community that may know very little about the benefits of holistic therapies. I get to contribute that not only to the community, but to everybody in the building. That is what I get to offer.
We've gotten to a deeper level of understanding. It's not just about a building.
I think it's very important that I share quality items right in the heart of the community in which I was raised.
I get to give back to the community that I grew up in.
There is a healing that's coming from this project.
Absolutely.
And feel invested in some really, really fruitful work that will benefit the city of Milwaukee and the Sherman Park area.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the real change happens when you encourage relationships. I hope I quote this correctly. I think Abraham Maslow said that what is necessary to change a person is to change their perspective about themselves. I think little boys and girls who come in and see that this is an amazing business, this is an amazing place, and knowing that a person of color owns this, I think it sets a huge tone for the direction that we should all be striving to go within this country. It means a dream realized.
I'll be opening my very first brick and mortar yoga studio here at the Sherman Phoenix.
Our founders of our foundation, Lynd and Harry Bradley, believed in entrepreneurship, the power of community, and that's what this project is all about.
We have a lot of investment in Milwaukee of skyscrapers and sports arenas, but this is really where the rubber meets the road, where you can get businesses to get a foothold in their communities and employ people in their communities.
For me, this really underscores what a business proposition this is. It works as a private sector model in places that don't have opportunity like this.
It allows ownership and a stake in the future of one's own community. Sometimes resources all the person needs to have an opportunity for ownership and self-entrepreneurial startups to invest in the future of their family and their community.
In addition to investors and public support, it does need philanthropy. You can see the clear and evident impact of every dollar that is provided to the gift. You know how many people are being employed. You know that you're supporting an entrepreneurship program that ultimately will foster a sense of support and stability for entrepreneurship.
Those who are contributing are doing more than just putting their name into something that they can pat themselves on the back about. They can actually say, I've been an active participant in a movement that is truly going to impact economic, social justice, and change in the city of Milwaukee.
You love the city. Are you proud of your city? Are you proud of the community and want to see grow and succeed? And are you willing to invest in that then? If we want to see change in our city and our community, we're the ones that are responsible for that change. We, as business leaders, need to be involved. We need to be part of the solution. And so I would encourage them to be a part of this.
I think what people need to understand is that there is a very good business plan behind this effort, and that Joanne and Julie have great track records. You're always betting on leadership, and these two women are leaders worth betting on.
I want to invite people to join me. I want to ask people to say, hey, What can I do? Not just necessarily as an investor, although that would be wonderful. Shop here, play here, work here, meet the people that are here, find out what their lives are like, and see how their lives can improve yours.
Folks are looking for ways to pour into something that provides us with a different input.
This can be an example, not just for Sherman Park, but for other neighborhoods, for other cities like Milwaukee.
This is not something that stops here. I think that we are becoming a model for something that is way larger than Milwaukee. We're gonna hit America.
It's going to be the new definition of living in Milwaukee.
I get so many goosebumps watching that, it takes me back. It's a pretty powerful video. I hope you thought. Ah, stop. Okay. You also just got a glimpse at one of the tools we use in all of our projects, which is multimedia, to try and generate support for all of our projects. But wanted to introduce you to the first key element of the model, and that is the co-development mentorship model. We call ourselves co-developers on all of my projects. When I'm involved, I am the real estate expert, generally speaking, and then there's always a partner who is a key leader from that neighborhood. And in this case, Joanne Severe is my partner on the Sherman Phoenix project. Very well known community activist, business leader, executive in Milwaukee. So the Milwaukee Invest model uses this co-mentorship idea to bring together these different vessels of experience. The mentorship is definitely bi-directional, creating an authentic two-way sharing of skills, knowledge, and experience. In addition, it builds capacity through hands-on learning so that the co-developers walk through the entire project together. By partnering, we marry two well-established areas of expertise, that real estate development, which is critical for these projects to understand a pro forma, understand financing, understand design and construction, and then community organizing, equally important, if not more powerful, as you can see in this project. Without the key ecosystem of this community in Sherman Park, which I did not come naturally to in the project, we would have never been successful. You know, this also gives a community developer the opportunity to learn the trades and the skills of a project like this by walking it in a hands-on way. And there's less risk of competition, so they have opportunity to kind of learn and fail a little bit as they go, leaning into each other's partnership. And that gives experienced community organizers the tools to think about doing a project themselves. You know, this is an example of why co-development and community partnerships are possible. I love this slide, and I put it in every talk I do because I'm so proud of it. This is our architecture, construction, real estate development team. These are the leaders that put the Sherman Phoenix project together. And you might notice something striking about this team in its difference from most real estate development, architecture, and construction projects. And that might be the absence of certain representation, and rather the absolutely intentional and inclusive representation you see on slide. This is it, we are it. And that happens when your leadership team comes together as co-developers and makes a conscious decision to select expertise that is best suited for the project. And here we are. The other thing about co-development that's critically important is that it allows you to lean into each other. Having somebody walking with you allows projects that are extremely hard, extremely challenging, complex, often cutting ground for the first time, always resisting existing and established systems by breaking the status quo. That is stressful, and that is hard, and you question yourself all the time. Having a collaborator and co-developer to lean into for that support is critically important to stay the course. And of course, then there's this tenant recruitment we'll talk about next. So just to recap, these are kind of the key pieces of this partnership. It gives new tools to the community developer to help with transformation. Organizers have all kinds of skills. Being able to use real estate as a tool is a new skill. Teaches them the technical know-how. You know, real estate development is not rocket science, but it's not simple. in learning all the pieces and parts of how to do a deal is really important. And it helps community activists develop new networks. I have a whole set of networks. Likewise, my community partners have their own, and we share those so that we each build a broader personal and professional network. The next innovation of the model I'll touch on, how's our time? Oh, we're good, okay. Is this idea of tenant cultivation, which sounds pretty dry and straightforward, but it's fundamental to our success. We recruit and support local businesses and organizations as our tenants, and they're primarily run by women and people of color. And that has not been an intentional strategy, it's been default. I think it's because there's so much pent up demand and unmet supply to engage these entrepreneurs. Through Milwaukee Invest in our projects, we have created more than 60 commercial spaces for small businesses. And there's just, more to come. We can't do enough projects to meet the demand for these small businesses across Milwaukee because they exist in parts of the city where development is typically not happening. This tenant model we use is driven by harnessing real estate as a community benefit and getting people to understand what that looks like. We talk with neighborhood leaders and residents to identify proposed uses that are the highest priorities in that neighborhood. We don't just give them what we think they want, we ask what they would want and respond to that call. That same dialogue helps generate leads on potential tenants and the ideas for what the community wants in terms of gathering spaces. So I often say that community participation is not a step in the process, it is the process. It stands in this process is in strong contrast to many commercial development projects. In disinvested neighborhoods, traditional development often starts with a generic redevelopment idea without a specific vision for the community, the future tenants, or their needs. Tenant businesses are typically recruited in traditional development if they can financially deliver the rent, if they have a stable business plan. And traditional developers typically recruit tenants that meet this need. And in disinvested parts of the city, that often means we get national chains or businesses that don't have a direct tie to the community. In many cases, these traditional approaches lead to undesirable mixes of services in neighborhoods, an overabundance of fast food restaurants, check cashing stores, convenience stores, and the like. Even community-minded development projects often have unintended consequences. Many rely on nonprofit organizations as their tenants, and while those are important to the model, they often displace necessary commercial activity that detracts from the tax base. So our emphasis is on tax-paying real estate and viable for-profit businesses, but using a disruptive strategy of seeking those businesses from within the neighborhoods we come from. In recruiting tenants, traditional models look closely at a potential business's bottom line. In our model, it's really more about their capacity as individuals and their tenacity and passion. They have to have a spirit to learn what they don't know. There is something very trust-based in our process that leads to our tenants. We give people the opportunity to succeed, and we don't have hard and fast rule boxes we have to check. We generally don't require business plans. We don't generally require financials. Almost every tenant I recruit does not have those, although a few do. And we just really walk through what we know it takes to run a business. That is blasphemous to almost every developer and seems like a crazy person talking. I will tell you that hardly any of our tenants have failed because it's about relationships. It's inherently riskier to take this approach, but without risks, these communities will remain stagnant. So it's really, what we often say is it's relational and not transactional. You'll have to understand that there will be mistakes and we're forming relationships and that tenants like this are taking risks, but it's calculated. So mostly these people surprise me as tenants. And the honest truth is that small businesses fail every day, all the time. They fail for white people, they fail for Black people. They fail in rich neighborhoods, they fail in poor neighborhoods. There's nothing remarkably different. In fact, if anything, I found way more opportunity and success because there's so much pent-up demand in the neighborhoods where I work. The other key piece about the tenant cultivation is that we view our tenants as partners. They're not just somebody that fills a space. So we play hands-on roles together in cultivating their space. We help fundraise, we help mentor, we give them access to our social networks and a community of customers. And We also really don't, if these folks would have come to a traditional deal, the deal would have been dead. It's a huge barrier for most of these folks to be able to afford the space in general. They certainly don't have access to capital to do tenant improvements, for example. So we always fundraise in our projects to complete a build out for a tenant, all the way to here's the key, walk in your space. We design it exactly for them. The risk is they fail, and then we have a shoe shop built exactly for a shoe shop. But so far, most of our tenants have not failed, or they've been able to turn over to an entrepreneur who can fill the space. So the final strategy is community investors. And I just want to spend a little time talking about how this works in our projects. What we do is we, as co-developers of the project, invite local residents to participate as investors in each project, and we use a crowdfunding model. It's a game changer, really. I mean, crowdfunding has become much more popular since I started doing my real estate development, but there aren't a ton of applications that at least do it in the way we do it in terms of inviting folks to participate. It is a critical gap we fill in the financial barriers. The project, by bringing in local neighbors as owners, strengthens the wealth of the community and creates a community of project champions right in the neighborhood. It blends private patient capital with philanthropy, which we also use in all of our projects, but then supplements it with these neighbor owners. And all of that together creates the financial viability of our projects. There is a common perception that low-income neighborhoods will not produce investors, but our model has found that low and moderate income residents can generate significant resources when those funds are pooled together. The model works with investments starting as low as $1,000 and by using sweat equity exchanges from neighbors who can contribute labor in exchange for ownership. Those neighborhood residents are joined by other investors across the city. On the left of the slide is Jeff, who was a homeless resident in the neighborhood where the restaurant was open that he worked in, who gave sweat equity to gain $1,000 ownership stake in that project. On the right is Ursula. She's actually an architect, just retired recently, who had more means and lived on the other side of town. We recruit people like Ursula and other higher net worth individuals to join as equity investors at an angel level of investment. And so together, these pools of individuals come together as our ownership group. The one thing that I've noted on the bottom of the slide is just this vehicle called Fund Milwaukee. I will talk about this at the very end of my project, but Fund Milwaukee is a local platform. It's a separate all-volunteer organization that helps bring together local community investors and local projects. And you probably have pitches in your community where small businesses and entrepreneurs get to pitch. It's sort of like our pitch platform. It's a effort I started more than 10 years ago. It's all volunteer. And so it's sort of a built-in infrastructure. It's a place people know to go if they want to hear about local businesses and if they're looking to invest. So I pitch all of my projects through that vehicle, as well as many other ways across town. Okay, let's see. So this community capital piece, we can talk a little bit more if there are questions, but it could be a lecture in and of itself in terms of how we build this model. As I've started to do my real estate, the crowdfunding laws have been changing rapidly. When we started, there were none, and we had a certain way we approached it. Now Wisconsin has its own set. Each state has different crowdfunding laws. We follow those. But the most important thing is that this community capital that we raise is super critical. It's a catalyzing step. Often it's used as a down payment, the initial earnest money. When you're trying to develop a real estate project, this can be some of the first money in. It helps you build credibility, build your plan, and gives you some patient time to get a real estate deal put together. As the project advances, these community investors play a very significant secondary role as they're totally invested in the project's success because they're owners. These investors become the customers of the business. They engage their own networks to promote the project. They shop at the business. They tell others to go shop at the business, because when you own it, you want to see it win. You know that when you're buying your pizza at that pizza shop, they can pay rent, and that rent generates the return on your investment in the project. So for the community owners who are also neighbors, being able to invest in your own Main Street becomes even more meaningful. It's not just that you want, to see your money come back to you. You care that the building looks good, who's in it, whether there's trash being cleaned up. And this level of local accountability pushes back against the detrimental impact of absentee landlords, which traditionally don't care about their properties in the same way in disinvested neighborhoods. This is the same slide I showed before, but a lot of the investors start to cross over on our projects, but you get the point that there are about 75 owners, community owners in this project. So this is what happened with the Sherman Phoenix project. It opened in November of 2018, 27 small businesses, 30 entrepreneurs of color. It's a wellness hub. It's a cultural space. When we could gather, it was just amazing. Retail, obviously, there's a whole sidebar about what pandemic has done. But what is interesting, this may be a question people want to ask, is that all of my projects have remained incredibly strong through the pandemic. We struggle, but the reason is every one of those owners and every one of those businesses believes at such a higher level, at the higher purpose of these projects, that they are committed to shopping there, to pivoting with the businesses, to reinforcing and doubling down on their commitment. And that loyalty and that web of strength has really proven out for all of our businesses and all of our real estate. And we know that when we can gather again, they will again become places that people want to get together. You know, this project is really powerful. It's been trying to disrupt a lot of patterns in Milwaukee. It's given people hope. A lot of people want to solve the problem of racial equity in their community, but they don't know how to move beyond protesting in the streets. How can I tangibly make a difference? And projects like the Sherman Phoenix are a tangible model of how you can step in. And they were done by people just like all of us. And it shows the power of everyday people like taking the next step in that sort of action. And so, you know, I started this by saying, can real estate be a tool that builds racial equity? And I think my answer is, I hope so. You know, I still have to be vigilant. There is a ton more work to do here and across the country. And also it's my forever responsibility to exercise my unequal power as a person with white privilege to always be a part of that solution. So let's recap this. I'm almost done with just what it looks like after at the Sherman Phoenix. I'll play a quick video for you now.
Welcome to the home of healing, named the Sherman Phoenix. It's a song, it's a poem, it's a remix. It's a meal with friends, pretty clothes and perfect lines. It's a coffee shop, pizza place and brilliant minds. It's an airbrush, popcorn, spices in this color door, paint brushes, yoga mats, dancing on the cement floor, fitness spaces, nails, desserts, feels like home. And 99% of these businesses black owned. Listen to the people, faith is strong here. Listen to your heart, you belong here. Look at all these faces, we are all here. It's a peaceful place, you can come and dream here. There's a spot at the table, you're invited. We are strong and able when we're united. Every color, every shape, every dream, every faith, we're excited. Come and see inside it. There's a spot at the table, you're invited. We are strong and able when we're united. Every color, every shape, every dream, every faith, we're excited. Come and see inside it. There's a spot at the table, you're invited. We are strong and able when we're united. Every color, every shape, every dream, every faith, we're excited. Come and see inside it. There's a spot at the table, you're invited. We are strong and able when we're united. Every color, every shape, every dream, every faith, we're excited. Come and see inside it.
Sorry. Oh, I almost got through it without screwing up. I don't know how to go forward except to do this, everybody. Remember what we just talked about? We're almost done. Here it is. Here's a quick recap. Sorry about that. Okay. This is the final slide of the Sherman Phoenix I want to show you. We also did some green infrastructure just to bring it full circle. Bringing environmental sustainability to all my projects remains important, just as much as racial equity remains important. And so this is a lot of green infrastructure we were able to do at the entrance to the building. We also engaged a muralist who did a really powerful mural on the side of the building, some shots from the building. It's just a really powerful space. Again, just to give you a sense of the overall impact, I only highlight a few of my projects today. There are probably a dozen in total that I've done. They range as small as, $250,000 to upwards of $7 million. Some of my, they're the all sides of town, Latino, white, Black, different ethnic focuses, different, kind of social underpinnings. Sometimes I work with nonprofits as my development partners. So really a whole range, but always implementing those three key elements in the model in terms of how we get the work done: co-developing, local businesses, and community investors. This is the ultimate impact of our projects over the past decade. We've transformed multiple main streets into places of destination. By maintaining community ownership, we help hold against gentrification. So those owners who are original residents in that neighborhood maintain their stake, maintain their ownership stake in a piece of real estate, even if it happens to appreciate. We've created a ton of entrepreneurial leaders. There are more than 270 jobs that have been created through our projects. That community wealth is circulating through our more than 200 community owners. These neighborhoods have gotten stronger identities as a result of our anchor projects. And it really changes the narrative in all these neighborhoods in terms of what is possible. Just a couple more pictures. This is a quote my partner Joanne from Sherman made that I really think is really powerful. Why do we why do we want to disrupt in terms of what we do? Because the nonprofit sector is not really fixing the problems we face, and the traditional systems in the private sector of finance and real estate are not working. We must ask what is needed to challenge the conditions that give root to poverty. We want to create wealth. If you keep supporting poverty programs that don't give people a pathway into the economy, then you're going to maintain poverty. This model provides access to income for tenants, community investors, entrepreneurs, developers, and employees. It's a real testament. And I think, just to wrap it up, what next? My goal is that we expand this model to new communities, that we keep replicating it. Perhaps we develop a fund so that we can scale up projects more quickly. I am actually doing my first project out of the state of Wisconsin in terms of attempting to scale. This is the project I'm advancing in Evanston, Illinois. Similar to the Sherman Phoenix, a team of local partners, actually 2 Black women police officers are my partners on this project. They're amazing leaders locally. This is a hub dedicated to wellness. We are raising money right now, following all those same model components have translated wonderfully. It's an exciting project happening. We hope breaking ground later this year. We're just about to close on this building. I would encourage everybody to go to my website for a couple reasons. I have a very detailed case study of all of my projects and the Milwaukee Invest model that you can download for free off my website. If you are interested in any of the specific details I've talked about, you can do a much deeper dive on the projects and the elements. And also, you can connect with me through my website as well. And Fund Milwaukee, which I very briefly mentioned as that platform for how we help do fundraising with community investment, there's a link there as well, and you can check out a deeper dive on Fund Milwaukee. And I don't have any platitudes to finish with. That's it.
Well, I think we can all clap. It was fantastic, Julie. It was, wow. And there's so much I learned from our previous engagements. This is amazing stuff. It really is. There are a few questions in the chat. I'm going to try to summarize a couple of those if I can. So, hey, Barry, great to have Barry on from HUD. How did the city provide any CDBG support for the projects? Would there be value in establishing matching funds, CDBG? How do these fit into a city's consolidated plan? What is that relationship of public funds? And is it something you stay away from? Is it something you leverage? How does that work?
Great question. We absolutely always have city participation in our projects. And unlike a lot of these mega projects that we think get tax incremental financing and other tools that are typical for cities, we're actually the kind of projects that those programs are designed to help. And so we have not technically used CDBG in any of our projects. I think it has to do with how in Milwaukee the funds are allocated, and we just never cracked that nut. But I think it's a great idea if you can do that in your own city. We use similar buckets of funds. We have facade improvement funds, retail investment funds, signage programs. So we definitely tap every bucket we can. We've also done TIF, tax incremental financing on the Sherman Phoenix was a lever we used that brought $250,000 to that project. We also have worked with our state government. The Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation is our economic engine for the state of Wisconsin. Been very powerful. They have economic development grant programs, and we have successfully applied to some of those. And I would say the other program federally that a number of my projects have leveraged is the Office of Community Support through HUD. And they offer a really great program that partners with community development CDCs. And we have partnered with local CDCs and gotten up to as much as, I think, 800,000 on one of my projects through, they're tougher, longer term grants, but we sort of use all of them. And I would say in our projects, the city is a fabulous partner. We often buy a foreclosed building from them and they partner with us to make it happen. So can't say enough about our partnership with the city of Milwaukee.
Oh, that's great. So and that answered a little bit of another question about TIFs. What would you say, do you have in terms of the tax value return on the projects? Have you looked at that? You had an infographic at the end that talked about that. Is that representative? Probably this didn't have a lot of tax value to begin with, most of these projects.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We have exponentially increased the tax base, but I haven't done that analysis and I should. I mean, the first project I showed, the Clock Shadow building, was a toxic, non-performing site. So it went from that to, it's now, I mean, its appraised value, its assessed value is probably 3 to 4 million. So that's a huge leap as one example. But the other part of that question is, that project cost 7 million to build. So we invest way more than the valuation will achieve. And I've only been doing this for 10 years. And I would say my longest run project is about halfway to its valuation. So if we wanted to sell that project, could we get all of our equity back? Probably, because we put philanthropy in the capital stack. So because I've rarely used debt and I use enough philanthropy, on the Clock Shadow building, we now could sell it and all of our investors could get their main equity back and they've gotten a return every year, but it's patient capital.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Another question here. Does it take a lot longer because you use the crowd for funding for that? And is there a percentage of the project that you try to crowdsource? So both the time and the amount that the crowdsourcing represents?
The time to recruit equity investors is not exceptionally long. There's usually actually pent up demand for that. But I would say the projects in general are long. As much as I try and scale up and move faster, these projects tend to take at least a year, and that's fast. They're usually closer to 2 years. So it's a very slow moving beast. In terms of, what was the second part of it?
Kind of, do you have a target for your crowdsourcing? Is 15%, 10%, or?
Every project is different and it's a math model. We basically figure out how many tenants can we put in there at a reasonable rent, and then cover all of our costs such that what's left over generates a return of somewhere between 4 and 6%. How much equity can we return 4 and 6% on? That's how much equity we seek to raise. The rest is philanthropy or government support. So we dial it in or out. In the Sherman Phoenix, there was probably 75% philanthropy, 10% equity, and a few other sources. In some of my projects, it's way different. It's maybe 75% equity. So it really depends on the strength of the neighborhood we're in and the strength and the details of the project.
Next question. What percentage of those businesses were startup businesses versus relocating or already established?
I would say that the majority of the businesses I work with are early stage or startup. Purple Door Ice Cream was selling at farmers market and working out of their kitchen when I took my bike and went to a fair and said, you should be a tenant in one of my buildings. And a lot of them are just, waiting for their shot. So super high risk. But then now that we've become more established in our model and people know when I'm doing a project, we've gotten folks who, what it is more typically is they open a second location. So some of our barber shops and salons have opened a second. Yeah, I don't have the exact percentage, but I would say at least 75% are new.
Yeah, oh, that's great. So now we're going to get into some technical questions for one of our colleagues. Does fixed take landlord equity or a developer fee?
Yes.
Perfect answer.
So, it really depends. I actually have now, I get hired by clients. So some clients will pay me just a consulting fee. On projects I initiate, I typically get some sweat equity in the deal and I typically get a fee. It really depends. Some projects, my fee is very little and some it's better, but it's always a co-developer fee, just to be clear. My partner, Joanne Sabir, that you met, she and I make the same exact amount. So that fee is equal for the two developers in that case.
That's great. So Bruce has a much more detailed question here. Have you considered establishing a public capital marketplace, AKA a local stock exchange in lieu of or supplement crowdsourcing?
Oh my God, I'm one person, but yes. I mean, I started Fund Milwaukee as a mechanism to try and help facilitate these transactions and found that in and of itself was an overwhelming unpaid job. I definitely think about the limitations of scale right now. And the only way to accelerate it is to have more people like me doing this, replicating it, or raising more funds more quickly. I want the marketplace of people who do that to do what he's suggesting. I personally don't have the capacity or time or expertise, but it's absolutely needed. And there are some models starting to come up around the country. Part of the problem is that every sort of platform or mechanism then has to take a fee. Somebody creates it, somebody works for it, someone supports it, and those all have layers of cost built in. The simplification of it is part of why ours works. We can keep all of our costs low because we're not paying all these other third parties.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, again, fantastic lecture, great stuff. I'm sure you're going to be hearing from more of those who listen to this, and thank you for sharing what you're doing, and the website will definitely all take that out. And I'm anxious to come up to Milwaukee again and reconvene some conversations. Thank you again for doing this, Julie.
Thank you, Scott. We're known as the Bruce City. If any of you come, reach out to me. We can grab a beer and talk more about it.
But I read a book on the decline of the neighborhood bars in Milwaukee. It's down from a bar for every 100 people or something down to 120 or something. I don't know.
It's true. I will say that alcohol licenses in my projects are very slim. It's not very sought after in my development.
Julie, thank you. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please send us any other comments or thoughts. And we look forward to the lecture will be available on YouTube. So share it with others and this great work that Julie's involved with. Have a great day.